Welcome, everyone, to the Rainmaker Report. I'm Andy Thompson, and here are three late breaking cybersecurity stories that you need to know about. First up, Google just added another naming system to the threat actor naming mess, and they're pitching this as a fix. But I got a spoiler for you, folks, it's not. So last week, Google Threat Intelligence Group announced that they're merging their two internal naming systems into a single set of names built around memorable word pairs. Okay, so think sandworm relic, strawberry tempest, because guess what? They're real. And And here's what's actually happening, okay? When Google bought Mandiant back in 2022, they inherited Mandiant's naming convention, so things like APT 28 and Fin 7. Now, meanwhile, Google's own in house threat intel team had its own separate system that was running for years. So you have two teams, two naming schemes, and one company. So Google's answer was smash them together into a third thing. Yeah. So now we have word paired code names that are supposedly easier to remember. And this matters because, well, threat actor naming has really been a problem. It's been a disaster for years. Microsoft calls one group Midnight Blizzard. CrowdStrike calls the same group Cozy Bear. Mandiant used to call them APT 29, and now Google's adding fresh vocabulary on top of all of that pile. So every vendor thinks that their names are the clearest, and every CISO reading threat reports has to, keep a translation table to figure out, which two reports are talking about the same threat actor. It's just confusing. So the evidence here is the real problem, okay? If you look at any breach write-up, you'll see analysts are routinely having to list 4 or 5 aliases for a single group just to make readers aware of, who they actually mean. And I mean, I've done this myself. Let me put it this way. There have been industry attempts to try to address this for years, and none of them have stuck because every vendor wants their naming rights on the groups that they discover. I don't know really what the solution is. I don't know, maybe more of the same. Google's word pairs will show up in their reports going forward, and other vendors will probably keep to their own naming conventions and then just mapping the problem. So I think it's just going to get worse. Your takeaway here is that if your threat intelligence program doesn't already maintain an actor alias mapping, you might want to consider building one this quarter. Because guess what? The vendors, they're not fixing this. They're only making it worse. Moving on to our next story. The Pope's official prayer app just leaked the names and email addresses of over 700,000 users. And the wildest part isn't the leak itself, but that an ethical hacker reported this thing 6 months ago and got completely ignored. So yeah, let's talk about Click to Pray. This is the official app of the Pope's worldwide prayer network. It's available in 7 languages and it runs on iOS, Android, and available online at clicktopray.org. And it's endorsed directly by the Pope himself. Users will log in, share their prayer intentions, and then pray together globally. And frankly, I find it really kind of wholesome. But what's not wholesome is that the API sitting behind it all is just handing out information to anyone who asks nicely. A researcher at Cyber News found the vulnerability and it exposed full names and email addresses for hundreds of thousands of accounts. Apparently, she reported this back in January. Yeah, just 6 months of silence later, and the data was just sitting there, still exposed. And this really matters for, well, a couple of reasons, really. First, a name and email combo tied to a religious app, well, that's just a phishing goldmine. And now you have a confirmed list of practicing Catholics with contact information. And that's, again, the exact stuff that targeted scammers pay good money for. Also, this is a textbook case of coordinated disclosure failing. Because the researcher did everything right here, and the vendor, they did nothing. Yeah, and that's the pattern that I want you to notice here. Okay, faith-based, nonprofit, and other like mission-driven orgs are often run with like donated funds, developer time that's just running on like minimal security budgets. And yeah, vulnerability reports will basically at that point just go into a black hole. Yeah, so I would expect more leaks from apps that you never really think to worry about. So things like church apps, charity platforms, community tools. None of those tools, folks, are getting pen tested. So this is your takeaway, okay? If you're running any sort of like security for a nonprofit or faith-based org, you really need to set up a security.txt file this week, okay? It allows the opportunity for security researchers to contact you securely because basically ignoring the email doesn't make the vulnerability go away. It just makes the breach that much worse when it happens. All right, let's move on to our last story of the day. Microsoft just dropped a new AI model built specifically for cybersecurity work, and they're claiming it does the job at roughly half the cost of general purpose models. It's called MAI-Cyber-1-Flash, and it's baked into this new thing they're calling M-Dash. So first, MAI-Cyber-1-Flash is Microsoft's first in-house model that's tuned specifically for security tasks like vulnerability identification, code review, and remediation. All right. Now, M-Dash is this multi-agent harness that wraps around it. And the pitch is that instead of like one giant model doing all the work, you've got a bunch of smaller specialized agents that are coordinating together. Microsoft says the model went through their AI red team, adversarial testing, and a third-party assessment before shipping. Now, I'm going to tell you why I decided to bring this story up today, because it's the cost angle. Okay, the cost angle is the real story because security operations are drowning in AI spend. Okay, every SOC is bolting on a large language model onto something, and the token bills are getting genuinely painful. Okay, so if Microsoft can actually deliver comparable output for half the price, this is going to reshape budgeting conversations very quickly. And their argument for building it is actually honest for once, okay? Because attackers are already using AI to scan massive code bases for bugs. So defenders need parity or they lose. Yeah. So let's pivot for a second, okay? Let's talk about evidence. Now, the evidence side is a little thinner than I'd like. Okay, so Microsoft published some internal benchmarks, but we don't have independent third-party numbers yet on how MAI-Cyber-1-Flash stacks up against Claude or GPT for real vulnerability discovery. And we should also mention that this launch lands right as Google, Anthropic, and dozens of startups are all pitching their own security-specific models. So the competition's really heating up fast. So what's next? Well, I would expect pricing details and actual Azure integration terms to come out soon, okay? That's where half the cost claim either holds up or it falls apart. So your takeaway here, okay, if you're evaluating AI tools for your security program, start asking vendors for token economics, not just capability demos, okay? The cost curve is about to matter more than the leaderboard, okay? That about sums up today's stories, folks. This is Andy Thompson signing off.